welcome to our talk. Today we're here to speak about alternative pathways into animation, VFX, and gaming. We'll discuss how to challenge the status quo and create alternative career opportunities, especially for untapped talent and under-resourced communities. I have an amazing panel here today. To introduce myself, I'm Alison Mann. I am talent manager and co-president of Fourth Wall Animation at Fourth Wall Management. In my role, I'm responsible for managing talent and strategizing the development and talent for feature film, international series-based projects, collaborating with business affairs, recruiting, and creative team to foster new relationships with key creatives within our industry. I'm also the CEO, co-founder of the BRIC Foundation, an organization set up to solve how to create new access points for women and people from underrepresented groups that can excel in creative leadership and enable culture change through engaging and empowering talent. So I'm going to kick it off for the rest of my panelists to introduce themselves. First, I'm going to have Jinko speak about who she is and why this topic is important to her.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Spark, for having us back. I'm Jinko Goto, Vice President of Women in Animation, and my day job is producing the next animated feature for Mark Osborne for Netflix Animation. This is something that's very, very passionate to all of us sitting here today, but for me, we want to see fuller representation in the workforce. And we know that going to art schools and four-year university is cost prohibitive, especially in the United States. So I'm excited to talk about what this group is doing and share with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jinko. Next, I'm going to kick it off to my buddy, Alison.
Thanks, Al. My name is Alison Frenzel. Two Alisons on the line, so we always kind of bat around. That one's Al. Anyways, I work for the California Department of Education. I am the education program specialist that supports all arts education for secondary, which is middle and high school, and all career technical education programs that are focused on the arts, media, and entertainment industry in the state of California. So we have about 250,000 students in these programs statewide across creative industries, and I have been very fortunate to be able to connect with this group of amazing humans and really start thinking about how we can change the system by building high quality programs within the free and public education that students receive during school. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. As I continue going through my squares, next I'm going to hit up Matthew Waney. Matthew, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Alison. Hi, everybody. And Spark, thank you for having us. I am a CTE educator. I teach both video production and animation in Los Angeles, LA Unified. And we are a span school, so K through 12. So we have our program going down from 6th grade up through 12th grade. I've helped build that program, and just our students come from low-income households. They're underrepresented and basically untapped with the talent that they have to have the opportunity to see and work with this type of equipment. So we've been able to set up different partnerships with DreamWorks and Nickelodeon, as well as working with Alison here, Frenzel, just to sort of help bring grants and funding to students so they can sort of see the opportunities out there as well. So I'll talk more about that as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. And rounding us out, Meredith, please tell us about you.
Thanks, Alison, and thank you, Spark, so much for hosting us. This is a topic I, along with my panelists, feel incredibly passionate about. I am the clinical program director at the Animation Project. We are a New York City therapeutic workforce development program. We are a nonprofit, and we've been around for 13 years. And our wheelhouse is storytelling, animation, and self-development. We work in groups with young creatives in the most unresourced neighborhoods in New York City to produce their original stories using the animation pipeline as a guide. So since 2008, we've worked with over 10,000 young New Yorkers, and we work with a 12 to 24-year-old demographic. And we work partnerships with over 30 folks or 30 organizations and family courts, transfer high schools, probation sites, alternative to incarceration programs, detention centers, prisons, and community-based organizations. And our longest partnership is with the New York City Department of Probation. We've been with them for almost a decade now, and they combined forces with the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment here in New York City to expand our programming about 4 years ago, because we are all in the same boat and know that we need to amplify not only the voices of the people who are telling the stories, but also support them in entering the pipeline. So it's great to be here.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, this group is so amazing. Like, these are individuals that are doing the work, that is making change. And when we talk about the challenges that are the current barriers that are challenging us when it comes to creating the most diverse workforce possible, these individuals are really doing what needs to be done. But I would love to hear from the group, starting with Jinko, about these barriers and these challenges that we're facing. And through all of our experience so far, what do those challenges look like?
Well, Alison, and you're doing this work too. So don't forget, the BRIC Foundation started, this many years ago. So kudos to the BRIC Foundation that you and Nicole are spearheading. So thank you for doing all the work you're doing. So for women in animation, we're about gender parity, and really when we say gender parity, we're talking about gender justice as well. And our goal is to reach 50-50 by 2025. When we called for this action back in 2014, the union represented women represented about 20% of the workforce within the union. Now we're about a little over 30%. So, but we've got a long ways to get to 50-50 by 2025. So we started looking and saying, okay, why are we still missing representation? And so we started digging, and we see that, these schools, these very expensive 4-year programs, it's $200,000 a year, $200,000 for the 4-year program. So when you look at that, you go, okay, who can actually afford to do this? Especially if we're looking to have representation by the BIPOC community, that is not something accessible. So I was invited actually through the BRIC Foundation last December to speak at Hollywood High School, where I got to really understand what the barriers were. These kids cannot afford to go to college, but they're talented. And if we can come up with a program and train them, we can find entry-level positions for them and get them into the pipeline. Once you're in the pipeline, then it's about your skills and your talent. And we want to give that opportunity. So we felt that this was something very, very important for women in animation if we want to hit that 50-50 by 2025 goal.
Great. And I think there's a couple points that you hit upon, which was kind of the educational piece, where it's a lot about the money and how much it costs. But I think there's also a kind of a connection the industry can be doing more, which is educating the educators and educating the parental units so they can support these amazing future creative leaders into our universe. So Alison, can you talk about kind of your perspective, and Matthew, as in the education system, where the connection has been kind of challenged between industry and education, and maybe a little bit on the government side?
Yeah, so as Janko mentioned, there's been over the last few years specifically, some challenges with students being able to afford colleges. And so we always say from the California Department of Education, it's a college and career conversation. It's not one or the other. And school really needs to start, public school, high school education really needs to start thinking in those terms. So again, at the BRIC Summit last year, as Jinko mentioned, we had convened a group of creative leaders from across animation, gaming, and visual effects to really think about what would the first step be if we want to create a pipeline that allows students to go to college and support them on that journey, and or something alternative that provides education, because education is not the challenge, it's the cost of some of these four-year institutions. So can we create an alternative education pipeline through a registered apprenticeship program that might parallel the experience in education and build from the base of public school, which is free. So this, out of the BRIC Summit last year, we established a stakeholder group of creative leaders that were very invested in changing this paradigm. And that starts with the California state model curriculum standards. Because every public high school in California that teaches career technical education focused courses in animation or game design, and we're adding visual effects, has to adhere to a set of learning objectives for students. Well, if those standards are not aligned with creative industry's needs, then students aren't being prepared adequately for the next step to enter creative industry. So our entire effort for the last 4 months has been to take the input from industry leaders and inform the rewrite of the California state standards for arts, media, and entertainment, specifically the pathway of animation, game design, and visual effects. And so I think, you know, I just wanted to kind of add that piece on, that we really have to think big picture and backwards map. Like, what are our what's our end game? What are the goals? And then how are we going to get there? And really, we have to change the whole system so that programs then can have a track to follow. So hopefully I answered that. Matt, I'll toss it to Matt because he's been working on this kind of boots on the ground as a teacher in California, but also as a teacher leader, kind of spearheading the work in this space. So I'll toss it to him and then we'll go to...
Thank you, Allison. Yeah, so I've been teaching at my current school for about 8 years now. When I came in, we didn't have a film program, we didn't have an animation program. So I was brought in to help sort of build it from the ground up. You know, and we had very limited equipment, no space. Classes were sometimes tough to find because they didn't always exist, even in LA Unified, the second largest school district in the nation. So it was just working with my colleagues and stuff like that to sort of make that happen. And one thing I started doing was going out and writing grants to sort of help bring in that technology. Because again, my students had the ability, they had the interest, but you know, we didn't have the computers when we started off that were able to access, be able to sort of give them that true experience. So that's kind of where we started and just be able to sort of build from the ground up from there. We did get to work with the BRIC Foundation 3 or 4 years ago as one of their pilot schools. And again, when we sent 12 of our students out to a actual VFX studio, and they got to spend an entire weekend there, 2 8-hour days, just really learning how to make animatics and storyboards and stuff like that, just being mentored by professionals in the industry. It just really opened up a world that, again, they were familiar with it, but they never really thought, oh, could I get a job doing something like this? And just to really put that as a possibility in front of them, and even for my students who don't ultimately decide that, to see that that is an option and opportunity is pretty amazing. And I tell both my video production and animation students, even if you aren't going to go into this ultimately, like, this is a part of our life, whether you're up on, you know, YouTube or social media, like everything has an element of animation or VFX or something to it. The more you understand it, the better off you're going to be at getting other jobs. And then just before I toss it over to Meredith, we've also had some success just, you know, reaching out. Being in Los Angeles does give us access to different industry leaders. And last year, even with COVID and us being at home for most of that, Nickelodeon had a mentorship program, and we're 6 months. One of my seniors who's you know, striving to become an animator got to go in and had 2 mentors through them. We're able to create, she was able to create her own project, her own animatic, and just really develop the character, the story, get feedback from them. And again, just it's a resource where students who are coming from lower income households aren't always, you know, they don't have the same contacts that you find in more affluent neighborhoods, but to be able to put that same opportunity in her hands, she just really took it, hit the ground running, and is doing amazing work. She's off now at college studying fine art and ultimately with a minor in animation. So
it's amazing how like programs and just like getting into the communities can really not only change lives, but get an understanding of an industry that is of privilege. We are a privileged industry, and it's not like going into the medical field, like where people know what these opportunities look like. I know for like the BRIC Foundation over the summer, we had an internship program where we supported Inglewood, Downey, and Glendale school districts. And the students, the interns through this program, learned to see all the different career pathways. And all of them were like, I had no idea that animation was this robust, that I could go into all these different opportunities. And all it did was take a few hours of our day to educate and support, and tell the teachers, tell the students, and they learned so much. Meredith, you know, your program through TAP is the work that you're doing is so important. I would love for you to talk about the under-resourced communities you're working with and the challenges maybe that they have faced and some of the wins, or how you've maybe flipped things to a positive in some of these individuals' lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you just mentioned, and what Matthew's speaking to, and Alison, Jinko, is this starts with going into the community. We can't just do this work in a vacuum or in a Zoom or from an office and have folks come to us. TAP has, since we started in 2008, we grab a laptop. It's an animator, it's a therapist. We put on our backpacks, we get on the subway, and we go to neighborhoods that don't have resources like the technology required in order to learn animation, nor do they also have the support of a creative arts therapist who can really like give them the personal development, social emotional development support that they need in actually like journeying through the full idea of realizing, hey, animation is something I could do. Wow. Matthew, I really identified with what you were saying about how, you know, our young people, because they don't see people who look like them and represent them in the industry, they often don't realize that it could be something they could do. But more than that, they often don't realize that a career in animation is even a thing. You know, and that's exactly what our young people are using. It's at their fingertips all the time. It's on the social media, it's in their phone. So once we get into the spaces, we find, like, as we all know, these young people are passionate about learning. And so once we give them the opportunity to learn how to use these classic and also cutting edge tools, they get credentialed ultimately, not only with badges as they move through our programming that replace expensive degrees, which we can talk about later, but also they get an opportunity to tell their story. And I think that's the other thing that the industry is lacking, is the people who have stories to tell that often come from challenging backgrounds. A lot of our young people have gone through the justice system, quote unquote justice system, I like to say, and they are identified in one role. Once you go through the system, that is your role. And it is very unlikely that you're going to find spaces that will welcome your creative input, and also like your progression out of the role of someone who is identified as the worst thing they did in their lives. And so what we find is, in the room with an animator and creative arts therapist, I love the spark of Spark Animation. It incites, it sparks folks and young people that we work with to realize, hey, this could be me. But what we also find is that we have to work with some of our young people for a very long time in order to support them through multiple levels of our programming. We've tiered everything so that people can come into the program and we might see them once. That's okay. Working in carceally involved systems, sometimes people, that's all that they got. And having just experienced a space where they were invited to tell a story that's important to them, which always involves their own autobiographical details, but also were introduced to this really dignifying experience of saying, hey, this is the same software that the folks in the industry use. We're not dumbing down anything for you. So once they are in the room and experience that, even a one-off is good. But we know that our young people want to learn more, so we've tiered our programming. And in tiering our programming, we have to build out a lot of services and support structures to get them through to the point where they're ready to graduate from our program and enter the pipeline. I'm thinking of one young man in particular, Manny, who we met in Family Court in Staten Island about 8.5 years ago. And Manny came to us and came into the room because there was pizza offered, honestly. And the idea of like building out an animation was like, what? That's not even a thing. We're going to make an animation. We're going to tell our stories, but moving them through the process, Manny really came alive. And we realized that not just Manny, but lots of other kids wanted more than us just coming once a week to family court. So that's when we started building out other programs. And Manny actually left Staten Island for the first time to come to Manhattan in order to come to like our first kind of grassroots internship program. And over time, he was with us for 7.5 years. We were able to hire him here at the Animation Project. He had industry gigs. He worked on a really incredible intern thesis film supporting our young people. And it took 7.5 years to work with Manny. And so I think that that's our joy and delight, but the industry also has to understand that if we're really going to invest in systems that promote equity and inclusion and diversity in the workforce, we absolutely have to take the time to support the young people who have been through the systems that have caused them not to have access.
I think those are some amazing points. Alison, can I I think you had a comment that you wanted to piggy off of.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to a couple of things Meredith said. Number one is mentorship, and Jinko, I think we'll go into this a little bit more in depth, but one of the things that I've heard from Meredith, but from other organizations that specifically work with students from, you know, families that have not been able to afford some of the private lessons that other students have received, or families that are, or students that are system impacted, right? Families that are system impacted. This mentorship component is essential. And so when we're looking at building out the education piece, I think it's really important to always think about the social emotional piece, the mentorship, the need to engage families and parents, and really making sure that we're not just building a door, we're actually helping build the scaffolding that is required to support young people. I also wanted to comment on the education and the post-secondary piece and just state that, you know, since we've been building this, we have had some incredible, very exclusive, very high-end art schools, and some very much industry recognized and respected art schools and training providers say we want to lean in. And so there is that piece to be noted, that it's going to take an army, right? And bringing in some of these institutions and having them create a public lane, as I'm calling it, right? For students that are coming out of these training initiatives. And then finally, software companies as well. We've had some incredible conversations with software companies saying, like, what do you need? So the industry is ready to lean in. And you know, something interesting that Meredith mentioned as well around students not even knowing about the jobs. Well, as we've been going to register these youth apprenticeship programs, we've realized that the government doesn't even know about these jobs. There is a need for economic data and workforce data around jobs that aren't even listed as existing jobs, and yet the demand is so great internationally. So that's some of the work I'm doing too on the back end, to meet with our EDD, to meet with some of the people. I'm like, where's the data? We need this to back and justify these programs and get subsidies and funding for all the parties that are doing the work. And so I just wanted to mention that it's not only the families and the communities, but it's like on the opposite end, the government systems, that this is an emerging industry that's growing exponentially. And so there's a lot of catching up to do, right? And so anyways, we have some really exciting things happening. I just wanted to kind of piggyback on those parts. And I'll maybe toss it to you, Jinko, to talk about the mentorship work you are doing with WIA.
Great. Thank you, Alison. So just before I go into mentoring, you know, just to piggyback on what you just said, is that we are a multi-billion-dollar industry, a global industry, right? And every day there's more demand for talent. So there's an opportunity. And one of the things that I think is really important is to educate the parents and the families, especially when you look at families that come from lower economic situations. You know, you want your kids to do the best, right? So the parents are, you know, I think questioning, going, is this a real industry? So we have to really educate early on and saying to the parents that it is an industry and we can create a pathway for your kids, for your children. They're especially talented, right? Artistically talented or technically gifted, that this industry is a viable job. So I think, Matthew, I know you're working K through 12, and I'm sure, part of your education program is also, teaching parents. But, people ask me constantly where they go, are you sure my daughter could be doing this? And I go, look at the number of jobs out there. So that's an important component. Then once people come into the workforce, it's really important that there's a mentoring program. So one of the things that Women in Animation established several years ago was to recognize the need for mentoring. And we started out with one-to-one mentoring because we felt that there are, as well as internal, external issues for women to get into the industry and then to grow in the industry and retain the industry. And we felt that mentoring program was the best way to do this. So we started with a one-to-one program. And then when COVID hit, we said, wait a minute, we've got to really start thinking about how do we turn our mentoring programs where we can be building virtual communities so that people have a connection and build communities. So over the last 18 months, we've mentored over 800 women from all around the globe. In fact, applicants have come from every continent except for Antarctica. So we're pretty proud of that. We wish we had more mentors, because if we had more mentors, we could mentor more people out there. But these success stories and these mentoring programs are amazing. For example, I had a story artist that wanted to be, that was actually a production assistant for me on a film. And she came and actually took a job down to be a PA because she wanted to work in animation. So our store team really rallied for her and mentored her through our production. And then she went and got a job as a story artist. So she came to me and said, how can I pay back? I said, become a mentor. Become a mentor. She signed up for a mentoring program. And last summer during the pandemic, she mentored about, I think about 10 different young gals from all around the country. And some of these girls would not have had the opportunity to go into the workforce. And in fact, there's a wonderful story where there's a girl from the Midwest. She would never had an opportunity to even think about getting a job, but by being in this mentoring program, she was able to put a portfolio together and got accepted as a story artist at Pixar. So that is like an incredible fairy tale almost, but it's great because with these mentoring programs, we're building a community all around the globe. And these relationships are going to be long lasting, lifelong relationships. So I think that's a really great way to help them get in, help them to grow within the industry and become our future leaders.
I love these examples because to me, this is showing that it's about being activated, getting in there and making long-term impact. It's not about being passive. And I would love to talk about kind of the recruiting current process that's in our industry, where I do feel a lot of it is passive. Again, we are in kind of this elitist attitude sometimes of people, if they really want it, should come to us. But there's a lot of barriers to that. One could be the parents not supporting into education of the arts. Another one could be that kiddos straight from school need a job right away to support their families. So it's not just, can I afford college, but I need to be able to support my family. I have to be the breadwinner. So like we talk about all of these individuals that come from under-resourced worlds and are untapped talent. So let's talk about the challenges the creative industry faces with recruitment, and how can collaborations between education, government, and industry leaders help reshape what that looks like?
Well, it sounds like the perfect question for you, Alison.
I know, but I can't ask myself a question.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to ask you to talk about it because you have been in the forefront of recruiting and talent development. So share with us, Alison, because I think it'd be great to hear from you.
So yes, Jinko, to that point, I have been on the recruiting front for over 20 years and in the development space and now in the management space. And I think it was after the last BRIC summit that I realized that it was a combination of all of these different entities between government, education, and our industry that need to work together in order to make really long-term change and to come up with programs that are like a trade school in a way where kids can get the education and go straight into the workforce versus going into a art school that might cost 100 grand. And what do those positions look like? I think resources within recruitment, like I think oftentimes our studios are strapped for resources in recruitment. And what does that look like? In being able to support. So I think when Jinko talks about mentorship, that it's great that these external groups are here to support the mentorship and making something making people feel that it's an inclusive industry. But I would like our studios to continue being very proactive and also creating that inclusive environment in when they're creating their production schedule, that it's not just about the money, but it's about allotment of time to create a opportunity for learning and growth. Maybe if that person that they're trying to recruit, that might come from an underserved community, to be able to learn in that they are field of support versus like, oh, I just got invited to the party, but nobody's there to actually play my music or ask me to dance. So I would love for investment of time into our production schedules. And then again, of being at several studios where I was one of 3 recruiters supporting a business of 800 people, you can't put it on the recruiters to be like, where's the diversity? It's, if there's only 3 recruiters focusing on, again, a population of 800, they're recruiting almost 100 to 300 people a year, and their resources and their time, there's not a lot of it. And so then to ask them to do all the heavy lifting is not possible. So I would love for that strategy to potentially change internally as well. So when looking at not just time, but money, like how can we invest that back into HR and recruiting so that we can support the earlier education and that we're not just moving people around like chess pieces. So that's my point of view. Would love to hear from you all, punting it back. Maybe Jinko, as a producer, what do you see within that space?
It's totally our responsibility as producers. I mean, when I first worked with Mark Osborne on The Little Prince, we said every shot in this movie has a little girl. But you look at the animation workplace, and especially if you look at animators, how many women were back then animators? Not a whole lot. You look at the big studios back in 2010, 2015, handful of women were animators. So we said, okay, if we are going to make a movie that's truly authentic to the little girl, we have to train and bring in female animators. So we made a conscientious effort and decision to do that. And so I feel if we really want to diversify our storytelling, and to do that, you have to have an inclusive workspace, right? And you have to have representation. Otherwise, you can't really tell authentic stories. So I feel as a producer, it's my responsibility to find that talent. Yes, and I totally appreciate, where Alison's coming from as a recruiter. I mean, it's a massive job to recruit. But, what's great is that, there's talent all over the world. And now a lot of them working virtually. Thank you for COVID. We can find great talent from all kinds of places in the world that we never could imagine. So for me as a producer, it's very exciting because we can bring this diversified talent into the workplace.
And I think within there, it's also about making sure that the gatekeepers are diverse as well. So looking for the next diversity in recruitment, casting, producing, management, any of these roles that are the people that are representing the companies or the projects, that so that people feel comfortable coming in and they don't have to change who they are, that people can meet them where they're at. And I think that's also so important when we're looking at the diversification of a workforce. I would love to hear about how we feel about working to help bridge the school to career pathways within our work. So Alison, Matthew, on an education and government standpoint, and then working within kind of the studios, how do you feel that bridge is already starting to help? What are you seeing already as a positive impact?
I'll start and talk statewide and then toss it to Matt for local. And then I think even Meredith can talk about this in the New York front, because I think we're bi-coastal here. So it's kind of cool to hear the both perspectives. The New York system is so different than the California system in terms of public education and the way they interface. One of the things I did want to say, and I think Matt, you had mentioned, we're kind of hot talking in the chat a little bit. Matt had mentioned exactly something that had popped into my mind. But I think in industry, when the word talent has a different meaning than it does in public education. And I think when we're talking about talent, we're talking about the entire, like we need to rethink that word. We're talking about anybody's potential, right? Talent in any space is not just the arts space. And I think that's where that's a shift that's a really easy one. And I think in industry, they refer to talent that way. It's anybody with potential. But in education, we don't hear it that way often, and kids don't hear it that, and they're like, oh, I'm not talented, I'm not good enough, right? So really shifting that paradigm. So when we're thinking about talent, we're thinking about all of the spaces that people have potential, not just maybe the next amazing visual artist or whatnot. And so we kind of mentioned that in a different panel that we talked about, but I think that's just finding that term has such different meanings and context in two different spaces is something, and just recognizing that. And so that's something that's been a new world for me, because I was like, wait, it's not everybody's like artistically talented, but when industry refers to talent, it is that untapped human potential, and it's a different meaning, right? And so I think that's one thing. But I think what we're seeing here in the state as like at a statewide level is these leaders. It's always the person, right? It's the Jinko, the Allison leaning in saying, we're going to make a difference and we're going to drag everybody along with us. And that's what's happening in California. We have an incredible statewide advisory and stakeholder group that's robust, that's from companies across animation, gaming, and we meet monthly, and they have informed the rewrite of our California state standards. They're now looking at committing to exactly what we're talking about, even if it's just one young person, taking that one young person and building a training opportunity custom to the company and saying, yes, no, we're not just going to only recruit you if you are a junior at this very expensive school. We're going to actually look beyond that and look at young people coming out of high school programs and then support them on this journey. And yeah, we'll pay them. As Allison said, kids have to work. So instead of it just being like, oh, everybody can do an unpaid internship, realizing that that's not like a possibility for many young people, and building alternative opportunities that allow for paid work on the job training, right? And again, it isn't part of the producer's responsibility, but I think it's also part of the studio and company or whoever that hiring entity is responsibility to allow that to happen, because sometimes that's where the buck stops, is like, no, we're not going to pay for an apprentice, right? Or we're not going to slow down production for somebody being trained on this, because it's all about, the grind, right? So I think really shifting that is the piece that we're seeing happen in California. and we are so thankful for. And I think just having the leaders, the people, the like who believe in this, who maybe had to struggle through their own journey to find this career path, but are now doing what they love. Like, you don't have to separate your passion from your career path, period, you know? So that's the story that needs to be told. And then Matt, I'll send it to you because I just, you know, kind of talked global, but you can talk a little more specific, and then.
Yep. Thank you. And I guess two fronts to that is yeah, I've sort of been working with Alison and other educators across California as we're developing this apprenticeship across the state. And so obviously we have people from all fronts, whether it's industry, different unions, community, colleges. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit more, because that's another great resource that students, especially for my students, are able to get, you know, when college is so expensive. There are dual enrollment classes where that is completely free to the students in public education, and they literally sit in their classrooms with me for their advanced animation class, and it is co-taught by me and a college professor, and they're getting both high school credit and college credit completely free for them. They're getting the skills, they're getting new experiences and stuff like that, which has been amazing. And as we're continuing to flesh that out and build that more, so many of the, at least in Los Angeles, the community colleges are looking to build, you know, AA degrees, or you know, even just certification programs where the kids will be able to go out and already step into the industry and not have to go to the, you know, four-year colleges. Not that you know, if that's a choice, they can still do both starting from that. And then just also even talking about the non-art jobs that are in the animation industry. I had one student, I was a senior last year, but I had him from freshman year, and so many. I guess to step back, I'm at a magnet school, and a lot of magnet schools you find across the country, they require applications and auditions and stuff like that. And I can definitely understand that, but it's also about what about the students who didn't have the programs at home and the equipment at home? And I had one student whose drawing skills were not that strong. He was aware of it, but he loved animation. He just kept going, took 2 classes with me, took the college dual enrollment class, and ended up still wanting to pursue this. He's like, you know, I want to be an editor, or work on the music design, or the you know, rigging, which is more technical and stuff like that. And he's like, as long as I can understand the animation and how to speak to it, like, I want to be able to get in there and sort of go from there. So
yeah, I just want to jump in a couple of things that have been said. One is the idea of actually paying young people to learn, paying young people to be in an intern program. We figured out several years ago that that is actually one of the key ingredients in working with young people who come from the under-resourced neighborhoods. So we tiered our programming, not only because the young people we work with need money to get from here to there and get a Metro card, but also because we want to teach them that their time has value. And in fact, that learning a skill, whatever job they might take on in the industry, because Matthew, to your point, that component that is not necessarily arts-based talent, but is the talent of somebody who can work with people, that is a skill and a talent. We realized, like, they need to know that once they move into the industry, they're going to need to know how to manage money. And so giving them an opportunity in real life to manage money, to know their time has value, and to know that they're entering a career path that actually has a sustainable income. And I think too, it's really important, like, just like Jinko said, your job and the other disruptors here in this call is to open up pathways and to you know, kind of move the gatekeepers out of the way. Our job is to train young people. And so to go into the middle school in Queens or the high school in Brownsville and to find and work with the talent in their neighborhoods, and then offer them very structured and very clear pathways they can take here at the Animation Project in New York to get to that place that they're going. And, you know, our dream ultimately, and it is happening, is that the young people who come from TAP become those people inside the studios who are continuously opening the doors, are the people who look like, represent, whether I am representing a Black young woman or a queer kid, whoever it is, you're someone who looks like me, but it's not just what you look like. Social mobility is a really big piece. So also I understand what it looks like to, you know, not have resources available to me to put food on the table. And having someone who understands those stories, supports that person's story, and then supports them in the workplace is the goal. And we're seeing that happen because when the industry hires our young people, they fall in love with them. When they come visit a group that we're doing at a detention center in Harlem, they absolutely can't get enough of our young people. And so I think, I do think that we're getting there, but it takes the work on both ends, from, you know, the people who have the keys to those of us who are working to open up the doors along the way.
Thank you so much, Meredith. You know, I want to end this talk on encouraging people to get activated. I think there's nobody that's listening to this panel right now that would disagree. They probably are like pumped to hear of all the things you all are doing. And I would love to, again, end it on a high note of what can individuals do, no matter where their startup in the industry, maybe they're assistants, maybe they're CEOs of a company, no matter where you're at in your career, what can people do to make, you know, to make change, to support these initiatives? Jinko, do you want to start?
Sure.
Any of your recommendations?
Yeah, I would say give an opportunity to one person, be a mentor, and then have your mentee become a mentor, and it grows, right? So if each of us did this one mentee every year, we would just have so many more people that represent the world. And so find that mentee and be a mentor.
Love that. Alison.
I say break down the walls that separate industry and education. I mean, that's what I feel like we're doing that's been so successful. It's amazing how many people are invested in believe in education, so lean in. I think that would be the one thing, you know, if you're a company that has the potential to hire people, lean in, say, yeah, we will participate in these efforts with you. We trust you. We're able to, you know, give you, we'll pilot. So everything's a pilot until it's viable, right? So we'll pilot this with you to see if it works. We'll build it with you so it works for us. So I think that would be it. Is just like, if you care about education and you want to see this work done, then ask how you can be involved, and we will be happy to tell you. So thanks.
Thank you, Alison. Matt.
I feel just being able to like open the doors, and obviously COVID has changed everything, but back before COVID, we would be invited to go to studios, go to different things like that for students to be able to, especially where your company is in your neighborhoods, like invite those schools over, send people out into their classrooms. Again, it is, we've already discussed it. It's something that they can't comprehend necessarily at times, but be able to see that, oh, here's a person who's done this job. Here's a person who's done this. I had a student first year, we took people to DreamWorks. You know, she was like, I don't really know what I want to do. My parents say I should be a lawyer or whatever. And we toured DreamWorks, and, you know, 4 years later, she applied and she went to LMU, focused in screenwriting and stuff like that. But again, those types of things can really change perspectives and change lives.
Love it. Meredith.
One note I just want to make is that one of our graduates is currently being mentored in WIA's program, and it's invaluable. And so I would just really appreciate that connection. And I think that, you know, we haven't delved too deeply into the intersectionalities of all this oppressive systems that, you know, make it really challenging for our young people to actually really learn in the first place that this is a viable career path for them. And so I think that once we've made the hire, once we've opened the door, I implore the folks in the studios to really sit and listen deeply, because, you know, our young people have experienced a lot of injustice, and they know what that is. They have a lot of lived experience. And I think with their long-term understanding of what it is to navigate those systems in these times, I think leveraging the fact that animated stories and animated storytelling is actually one of like the most powerful tools that we have for deepening empathy, building those bridges. And so just sit down and listen and be with people one at a time.
That's fantastic. And I encourage everyone to be a yes and. Never shut down conversations, always engage. There's always a solution. If we're like, we can't, should never be part of it. If you're feeling like this is important, if diversity in the workforce and inclusivity, it's a yes and. Even if we can't figure it out right now, That's why I encourage all of you. To that point, to my Spark audience, thank you so much for listening today. Spark, thank you so much for having us, these amazing panelists, here to talk about alternative pathways into animation, VFX, and gaming. We really appreciate it. We hope that you learned and are inspired to continue carrying on the torch of making opportunities for the next generation of creative leaders and creatives into our industry. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.